Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. This is Alan, the comic collector geek, and I got a really great interview. This guy, I actually bought books from him, and he's a really great YouTuber. Um, you know, I'm a bit of a fan of his channel. There's only maybe about 5 or 6 channels that I watch kind of a lot, like Comic Tom, which is kind of a weird one, but Automatic Comics is the guy that I'm going to bring on, and he collects the same stuff that I do, and he talks about the same stuff that I do. So I feel like there's always this parallel between our two channels. His went his went way better than mine did, but just really amazing stuff, and he really gets into a lot of the facts and stats, and he really does a lot of the analysis of comics, which is really what us geeky people seem to love. So I like the fact that he does these kind of reviews of heritage auctions, which I watch and he watches, and he really gets into all the facts and figures about the last sales and how well those sales performed. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in my guest, Ryan from Automatic Comics.
Hey,
So,
yeah, thanks for having me here today.
Oh, thank you. I've been begging you to come on this show for like a year or so.
It's always good to just like, if somebody just gives me a time, I'm like, all right, I'll be there.
Okay. Yeah. So you messaged me, and then I'm like, okay, this is my only opportunity. I gotta nail him down. I gotta get him on the show. And I basically said, okay, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, it was funny. So how did you, like, how long have you been collecting? How did you get into collecting? What's your collecting journey?
Yeah, so I mean, I started off as a kid. I have 2 brothers, and me and my brothers collected comics. I think like a lot of people in like the late 80s, early 90s, where it was like the hottest thing, or one of the hottest things in the country at the time. And so I have, just like kind of like to start that off, I have a couple books down here where it's like, let me see here, like this kind of stuff, where I have just a stack
of, wow,
of the like the X-Force, Deadpool card, stuff. It's for my childhood collection, where it's like this is what I'm gonna retire with. This is gonna be worth $1 million.
Did you get the long box of X-Force #1? Or
I don't have the full long box, but I have. I mean, for how many do I have of this thing? I probably have like 10 copies. 12 copies.
Okay.
Then of like X-Men 1, I have, another like 10 copies, like every cover. And, I think like most people did at that time, it was the thing where everybody's going to buy this stuff. So, yeah, I started off with those types of books. And my brothers and I, we played tennis when we were kids. And so my parents, they would take us around to these tournaments. And one of the first things we did whenever we got to a new town was we would get the phone book out, at the hotel, and just look up comic shops, like Yellow Pages comic shops.
Okay.
And so my dad would, he'd take us to whatever shop it was, and we start looking through. And I really liked, like for me as a kid, I've talked about this a little bit on my channel. Like, I mean, my favorite characters were Spider-Man, Silver Surfer, Thanos, and I guess also probably Wolverine, and then like Punisher, like I think like everybody then bought, like Punisher War Journal.
I have that as well. Yeah.
so that kind of stuff. And but I feel like one thing that was a little different about like what I collected is I also got a little bit into some of the older stuff, and part of that came from my grandparents. So my grandparents were antiquers, and so they would go to whatever, like antique shows or that kind of thing, and people would occasionally have comics, and they would either, I don't know if they bought them or if people just gave them to them or whatever. And they would bring them back, and my brothers and I would just be able to go through them and split them. Basically, it's like, here, you can have these. And so that was kind of how I had a split between the, at least at the time, like the super modern stuff and then some of the older stuff. So I think I've got some of that down here. So like, these are some of the books that like my grandparents had gotten that would have like given to us, so it's like, we've got like some old Walt Disney's comics and stories.
Oh, okay.
Like Mickey Mouse type stuff.
And the Plastic Man. I like Plastic Man.
So then we've got, there's a, let's see, I think there's I saw there's a Plastic Man in here. Oh, where is it? Where'd he go? Oh yeah. So then it's like, like Spooky #1, but in really low grade.
Oh wow, that's like really cool.
Like Sparkler, and Plastic Man, Archie Annual 10. You know, I mean, so it was a really wide range. There was some a little bit of, I think I have it in here too. Let's see.
So these are all your childhood books.
Yeah, these are like my childhood books. So like,
Nice.
you know, like Strange Adventures, Forbidden Worlds.
Oh wow! I mean, pretty good variety of.
Yeah, I mean, a pretty big variety. Yeah, like a little bit of Superman, you know, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of this, like, so I think that's probably what got instilled to me a little bit of an interest in the older books, you know, Silver Age, Golden Age, but I really didn't get into Golden Age until I was an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, it was the stuff like, you know, let's see, I've got a bunch of it here, you know, like the Wolverine, you know, all the like Marvel Comics Presents and, you know, these full runs and everything, you know, it's all that kind of thing. And, but then I'd say it was probably, I don't know, it was probably around 15 when I stopped collecting, and I probably had like three, four short boxes, something like that is like my total like childhood collection. And then, you know, went to college, all that kind of stuff. And
life happens.
Yeah. Life happens. And then it was probably, I'm trying to think, it was probably like 8 or 9 years ago. We were, my brothers and I, we were all back at my parents' place for Christmas, and my dad was like, I don't want any of this stuff in the house. He's like, if you don't take it, I'm throwing it out. And that's why, like, one of my buddies, he mentioned, he's like, oh, maybe your dad has like comics stored away from you. I'm like, no, he definitely does not have comics stored away, you know, somewhere from his childhood. And so I couldn't take him at the time. We had our car, it was full. We couldn't fit these like boxes in our car. And so my older brother was like, I'll take them, you know, we'll figure something out later. And so he took them. And then maybe like 5 years after that, so this was now, it's like 2018 or 2019 at this point. My brother and sister-in-law and niece came and visited, and he brought the comics with him. And so that got me to start, like, I was going through those boxes again, and you get kind of like nostalgic a little bit about it. My older brother had also, he had been buying and selling comics already for about 10 or 12 years. Like, he had gotten back into it in like around 2010 or 2009, something like that. And so I knew like a little bit about that side of it, but this was where I got those back, and I was, you know, kind of interested in him, and he had actually sent one of my books off to CGC to get graded. I was not familiar with CGC at all at this point. And so I had a Werewolf by Night 32 that I bought when I was a kid. And he's like, oh, this book is, you know, pretty popular right now. so I got that one back. It ended up being a 6.5. I think I bought it for like $20 back in the 90s.
That's a good $20 investment.
Yeah, that one turned out pretty well. And that was actually one of the first books that kicked off my selling. And so that, and so basically I got all those books back, got me interested, and then I started basically looking on eBay. And this is where I've kind of made some jokes about this in the past, how like my older brother, he definitely, you know, he's helped me out with things like grading and that kind of stuff. But at first I asked him like, hey, where do you buy comics? You know, and he's like, I'm not telling you where I buy my comics. You know, it's like that. It's always a secret, you know. And so that's why whenever people reach out and ask you, they're like, hey, where did you find these books? And I'm like, sometimes I talk about some of the dealers and stuff, but most of the time I'm like, you got to figure this out. You
got to be careful of revealing your sources.
Like I'm like, my brother wouldn't even tell me.
That's pretty sad.
So basically I started there, and then, you know, buying stuff on eBay. And that's when I really started to learn about grading. That was the initial harsh lesson, you know, where you realize that people do not tell you the actual grade of the book a lot of the time. You know, I bought a lot of stuff where they were overgraded. You know,
always overgrade, I find, you know.
I mean, I feel like I actually undergrade most of it. That's why, like, in my videos, like I get stuff back and I'm like, oh, these are nice. Because I'd rather be pleasantly surprised when I get a book back than disappointed. And I also want, if I'm selling a book to someone, I want them to be, you know, happy with it and not, you know, angry or wanting to return it or, you know, that kind of thing. And so I'd rather be a little under than a little over. And then, or in some cases, I mean, I want stuff where it's a lot over, you know, and you get these and you're like, oh my gosh, you know. And so so that was like my initial, you know, harsh learning lesson on eBay. But I'm still a big fan. I mean, eBay's where I do like 90% of my selling. I still buy stuff there. But I really got into Heritage. You know, I think you mentioned Heritage. And so for whatever reason, that's the site that I initially gravitated to. I think it's because I like their interface. It's the clean by far when you compare like Hakes, Comic Link, Comic Connect, Heritage, by far the cleanest interface. And so I like how theirs is all set up. I don't even have a problem with, it's not sudden death, like the countdown, because it's quick, not like Comic Connect, where they add like 3 minutes and you're like, oh gosh,
so
I gotta wait another 3 minutes.
That in my comic shop does that too. It's like,
oh yeah, they're brutal.
I've had one where it was like the last second for like an hour. Like, it's like,
I know you get so mad at people. You're like, just bid.
Yes, give me your full price. I don't care what it is. Just tell me what. Yeah.
But yeah, so I got really into Heritage, and so that just, I don't know. I just kind of stuck with them for the most part, and it ended up being like, I'm a numbers person, I'm a data person, and so I ended up recording everything whenever I was tracking books and this, and that's one of the things that when I started my channel, it started off as just unboxings, because I was like, I'm buying a lot of books that I mean, we see them on like your channel and my channel.
Yeah.
Like you don't see a lot of these books in many other, like a lot of stuff, they didn't go into the golden age or like the silver age as much. And so I wanted a channel that was something, what I liked seeing, like when I would watch, whatever it is, like Barry Gary or something, it's like when he had those types of books, that's what I wanted to see. And so I wanted something that was, maybe a little more dedicated to that. But I realized I'm like, this is just unboxing after unboxing. I'm like, I need to add something. And
something
so
a little bit more substance. Yeah.
Right. And that's when the comic boom happened. And I was like, what is going on? These prices are insane. It's like where I actually was getting really nervous about even selling. So I'm like, will I ever be able to buy these books back again?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then I started really tracking the data in a very dedicated, like I would say like directed way or dedicated way, where I had a goal in mind, where I wanted to watch how the market was moving. And that really, it helped me, kind of like see a lot of what's been going on, and how we saw that it wasn't every book spiking at the same time. It was basically like a wave that happened, and when I talked to my older brother about it, he was saying, it's like, he's like, yeah, it's like there aren't enough. I mean, I'll call it like, it's a niche enough hobby where everybody can't look everywhere at the same time. You don't have enough money for everybody to look everywhere at the same time. So it's kind of like your gaze like changes. And then it was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles first, then X-Men, then Fantastic Four, then Spider-Man, and it's just like, it just kind of like happened. And so that's why at some point I was able to tell people, I'm like, don't buy these. That's why, like Amazing Fantasy 15, when it was spiking like crazy, I was telling people, I'm like, don't buy this book. And people are like, no, you're wrong. It goes up forever. We've seen this like every other book. I mean,
if you look at the historical data on that book, it's like it spikes, crash, spikes, crash.
Yeah. So I mean, there was a lot that in a lot of books now. I mean, I've really noticed that there are some that are still elevated, but a lot of books have come back down to some pretty like prices where I'm not afraid to buy them. Like I mean, my channel, I used to buy a lot of silver and bronze, and it has been golden age for like a year. I mean, I was so afraid of buying silver age books, like just because the prices were so high, I'd stayed away from them. But I've been tipping or like dipping my toes back into it a little bit. I've been feeling more confident in the silver age prices, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a little skeptical about the prices, because I've seen the prices kind of still dropping, and I think we're not at the bottom of the market yet.
It really depends on the. I feel like it depends on
the book. It depends on the book, but the
so,
ones that spiked earlier are now kind of getting back to where they should be. Yeah, and the ones that are kind of were later to spike still have more room to fall. I think it's sort of like,
with a couple exceptions, like Amazing Fantasy 15, that book spiked and it was one of the last ones to go up, and it came down pretty quick. Like it's already at prices in a lot of grades where I'd be pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I think I was watching David's show and Comic Book Investments, and he was looking at the last Heritage auction and their big auction.
Oh, you mean the one that like just happened, or the one that?
Yeah, it just happened. Happened, and they had Amazing Fantasy on that, and it was down like half. Like
I talked about that one in my live stream on Saturday or like 2 days ago, like Thursday, and it was because it was a 7.0, and it went to like
that's the one.
115,000 or something. I mean, it just got hammered.
Yeah, I think it had a peak price at 280,000 or something crazy, or it was like
I think it was like 190.
okay, I thought it was higher, but okay.
Or no, it might have been 225 because I remember laughing at it in the live stream. It
Yeah,
might have been like 225, and I kind of laughed when I saw it, and I was like, oh my gosh,
that's
that's
brutal.
rough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but I don't know. I think people kind of made the mistake with that book a little bit, where
Mhm.
there was a bunch of auctions where they had like two or three copies at the same time, and
Well,
that's
yeah,
always
I've
the
talked
worst way to
about that a
sell.
number of times on the channel. Like given that I've watched how many heritage auctions I watch. I mean, I watch
Mhm.
every weekly auction. I
Yeah, me
never
too.
miss them. And I used to see one copy of Amazing Fantasy 15 maybe every 6 to 8 weeks. And
Yep.
then it got to the point where it was like you said, I saw as many as 3 per week. I probably went 6 months and didn't see a week without a copy.
Yeah,
It was just like people were just like, I'm selling. Like it went up so
it
much, and
felt like they were just dumping it on the
yeah,
market, and
yeah.
when that happens, people like I don't know, when you feel like there's that scarcity, even if it's not real scarcity,
Mhm.
like where you know you might not see a book for like 2 3 weeks or even a month or several months, you feel like if you see it, you got to buy it because
Yeah.
you're scared you're not going to get it again. But when you see it like in every auction and multiple copies, all of a sudden it's like, ah, I'll
Well,
get the next one. I'll get
and
no,
I tell people that with the Golden Age stuff, like sometimes you'll have a few copies sell close together,
yep,
and people get this concept like, oh, that's a common book, and you're like, no, it is not a
no, it's
common book.
not. Yeah,
It's like there was probably a big sale, a couple people decided to sell their copies, and now you will not see one again for 2 years,
yeah,
and that's the kind of thing where you need to like that's the difference with the Silver and Golden Age. When you see that happen, you take advantage of that happening because
yeah, yeah,
I've seen that happen on a few instances where I'm just like, man, I think people think this book is common, and it really is not. And
yeah.
so yeah, I definitely look out for that kind of stuff with the Golden Age, because that's one thing. Another thing I've learned watching Heritage is that they do not seem to like plan out their sales. Where
Yeah,
it's like
I'm actually surprised by that too. You're right.
because like I mean there was that what book was it? Shoot, I can't remember. It's the first appearance of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. It was like it's this modern book, but it was this modern book that it was really it
Like
hadn't sold.
Ultimate Fallout or something like that, or
No, it was one of these indie books from. Oh shoot, I had a bunch of copies and now I'm blanking on the name of it. It was this indie book from like 1990, but a 9.8 hadn't sold for like 10 years,
oh
and
wow,
then Heritage had a 9.8 come up. First copy sold for like $2,500.
hmm
Then they sold like 12 more copies week
oh my
after week
goodness,
after week in 9.8, and it just tanked down to about $500.
oh man,
I was just like, man, like that, and that's an example of that. It's like they had somebody that probably had, like a
multiple
box
copies.
of those,
Yeah,
and they just sent them all in and got a bunch of 9.8s, and then they're just like, all right, week after week, we're putting these out, and it
yeah. I
just
mean, I've seen that on some really bizarre books that, like, I'm wondering why, like, why do they keep on bringing the same books every week? And because it's going to
I
kill the price.
yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think they really are concerned about it. They just, they whoever sells gives them the books to sell. They're like, all right, we're putting them out there. And that's kind of how it goes. And which is fine. They're not trying to manipulate the market into making it seem like it's rare or something. But it
Mhm.
also, like in those periods, like it can artificially deflate the value of the book. So that
Yeah,
is the kind of thing you might want to look for if you're, trying to buy something like that.
yeah. I bought an exciting 39, which is a great Nazi cover,
Hmm.
and they had sold it the week before, and then they brought it back. So I got it like for $300 under the previous price because they
Yeah.
just kept on bringing the same book back. But there's only like maybe 20 of them on the census. It's a rare book, It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it always throws me off I mean, that was like Batman #9. I bought
mhm.
2 copies of Batman #9 from Heritage within like I think it was like 3 months, and then I didn't see another one for a year and a half on there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
exactly.
stuff like that where you're just like I mean, you take it, as I said, you take advantage of it when you see it. I mean, I've talked about that with people like on like the buying selling side of things. Like I am an opportunistic buyer.
Yeah,
That's
you got to do it.
I'm looking for deals. That's why like I don't often like people often ask, like what type of book or what are you looking for? And sometimes I'll talk about it, but the problem with that is that then you have people being like, oh, hey, I have this book. And it's like, no, I'm probably not going to want to pay the price that you want to sell it for. I'm looking for that, that auction that people aren't paying attention to, or something like that. To try
or
to
they
find a
mislisted or something silly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, actually, it was kind of funny. You actually showed this book in your top 5.
Mm-hmm.
The Catman 28. I have it right.
I've got it over here somewhere in this stack that I brought over.
So what was funny was I bought it. I think I paid the top price. It was a 0.5. It's really nice presenting 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
But right after my sale, whole bunch came on the market. There was one on My Comic Shop. There was another one on Heritage.
That was the book I was thinking of. I completely that was the one not the modern one, but like Catman 28 is a rare book, and it's been coming up everywhere.
And then I could have gotten the same, for the same price. I could have gotten probably a 2.5. Uh-huh. It's like I was like kicking myself the whole time. But
yeah, no, that is a perfect example of one where it seems like it's common, because I've seen probably 5 or 6 sell across Comic Link, Comic Connect, and Heritage in the last 6 months, maybe more than that.
Yeah, it was weird. And they, I think what happens is you get that record sale, everybody gets excited, and then they dump their books.
But that's kind of that cycle where then you get you have the new owners of the books, and then they're like, I'm not letting this book go, and then it disappears for a while, because that one is very high up on my keeper list. One, because I'm a big LB Cole fan. I like his stuff. I like the and I like the Pre-Code Horror stuff, and that's really to me that's one of his marquee covers. And then it's a Cosmic Aeroplane pedigree, which I've always wanted. Yeah, and I've always wanted that pedigree.
That was so cool.
I was when I came up, and as long as I felt it was around market, I was like, I'm buying this book.
That one. So yeah, how about I let you show some books? I'll make you pick it, and then there you go.
All right, so let's see. So I figure I'll start with my childhood pride and joy, because it was not Werewolf by Night 32. That one was just some random book I think my older brother told me to buy at the time, so I was picking it up. But my pride and joy as a kid was definitely this one, this Amazing Spider-Man number 44. I always wanted a first appearance, number 6, but that was too expensive for kid me. And so I don't even remember which shop I got this in or anything. It is all in my memory. It has always been in my collection. It's one of those books I always went and checked and looked at and flipped through. And so that was my one of my main ones. And trying to see, I brought a number of, so then I just kind of to go through some of these. It's I just wanted to talk about kind of my transition through comics as I've gone through it. And so here's all, I mentioned the Punisher War journals, I had just and these are still where I put them back to back. It's just all my old stuff.
Yeah.
Where you're not supposed to do this anymore, but
that is what you do as a young collector when you don't have enough money to buy the bags.
Well, yeah. And you got to buy more boxes to put them in, this is the most efficient way to store stuff. Exactly. Now, the problem is nothing I have is 9/8. I mean, I've gone through every book, and it's I have a few that are I sold some a Ghost Rider, that glow in the dark cover to someone, and he got it graded and came back a 9.6. So I had some that got pretty high grades, but most of them, I mean, one thing I didn't even know as a kid probably to check, and so I'm guessing most of them weren't 9/8 to start with. But it's it's the type of thing where I bought a lot of these. I mean, I was doing what people did a lot back then. It's you buy, you put immediately in the bag and board. And I'm like, how does anybody get 9/8? These books have been in bags and boards for 30 years, for 40 years, and they still aren't 9/8. So it's crazy to me how you can have someone get a stack of books and they submit them and it's 15 9/8. I'm like, I don't know how it happens. But
well, when I was collecting, I was so poor, I couldn't afford the boards, so I just put them in the bag. So I didn't even have the bag and board. I
definitely had some that were like that in here, and I have added bags or boards to them, when I first got the collection back. But but then one of the other, the type of books I really liked were I really liked Silver Surfer, and then especially the Infinity Gauntlet run. So that was during my childhood, was this was the Infinity Gauntlet crossover. And so that was like their way to get you to buy just like everything, you know, it was like every title had the Infinity Gauntlet, you know, crossover. And so,
and you had to get everyone, because if you didn't,
I had a pull list at our LCS at that point. And it's like, I would come back and it's just like, I remember my mom. So I went and picked up my pull list, and it was like 100. I hadn't gone for a couple months. It was like $110. And my mom goes,
"Oh, wow.
Did you just spend $110 on comics?" I mean, this is like, I'm a young kid, and this is like in the 90s.
Yeah.
And and I was like, "Oh, no, they rung it up on the other register." So I vividly remember the fear that I had
when she sees that number.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you had to buy so much stuff at that time to get all those crossovers.
They love the crossovers. That was,
yeah, for sure. And then let's see here. Then, you know, then here's like just kind of like, oh man, this is just an example of those books that you thought were going to be worth $1 million in the future, like the Super Pro #1.
Oh, wow.
You know? So yeah, I was definitely going to retire with that one. And then like all the, you know, the X-Men #1 covers and all that kind of stuff. You know,
I think that's a good set to have, though. Still, even though it's not worth much.
Super Pro?
No, not so well. Super Pro. I'm not so sure about Super Pro, but the X-Men one having all the different covers, I think that's a cool little collection. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I've actually got. I have some ideas on what I'm going to do with these. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Then like just like a couple more before I get into some of the other like the bigger books. But yeah, this was, I read this story probably 5-6 times when I was a kid. This was one of the reasons why I really was excited when they brought Thanos for the Avengers, was this Thanos Quest, you know, book 1 and 2. I love this. Like I feel like I feel guilty if I ever sold them, just because these were like probably 2 of my favorite books I had when I was a kid. Just that I remember when I went and saw that movie with my one of my buddies from work, and Thanos appeared at the end, and we were all super excited. It's like, and then they started to announce then they started to announce like how the series of movies were going to come out, and I'm just like, man, I just need to make it to the end of this. Like, I'm really excited to see how this all turns out.
That was probably like, in terms of movies, that run of like Infinity War and you know, Endgame and all those. And all those movies before that was just one of the most epic movie events of all time. I think
it's going to be so hard for them to top. I mean, I think that's one of the big challenges. I don't know how they're gonna top that, because I mean, you'd have to maybe go into, because I mean, granted, like the general public, I'm sure did not know who Thanos was.
No,
you know, so that's why, that's how you know it was done well, because it was like a character that comic collectors are going to know. General public doesn't know, but they still got into that, made tons of money. So they need to do something similar, whether that's with, you know, Galactus or Silver Surfer or whoever, like who that next like big bad is. They just, I don't know. They need to build into something like that it's not just comic collectors that are going to be interested in. It's got to be a broad audience. But yeah. So now getting into some of the graded stuff. So when I started buying on Heritage, I think that's where I first started buying graded books. I think on eBay I always bought raw, and then Heritage I started buying graded, because when I first started buying on Heritage, most of the books they sold on there were graded. They didn't sell raws very often. They've switched since then. They sell a ton of raws now. But so like, it's just an example of one, because I have a goal to try to like maybe get a really high grade copy of this at some point, but you know, I'd always wanted that, you know,
oh, you got it. So you got the book.
I have one behind me, and it's a 2.5, and then this one's a 3.5. And, but eventually I'm thinking maybe I should try to go for something, you know, something like really big in that one. Just kind of like, kind of my idea I've been tossing around is, if I can convert my childhood collection into a single book, you know, what like, and so and not just sell those and like get one book, kind of do, I don't know if you've watched any of my videos on this. I've been doing this, like building a comic business with $300.
I've watched those. Yes.
Yeah. So I've been thinking of doing the same thing with like my childhood collection, and trying to see if I can build it into either like an AF-15 or a really high grade Amazing Spider-Man 6. Just an idea I've been tossing around where, you know, then because they take like the boxes all take up space, you know, and so I'm like, maybe that's just something to be fun to try out. And I feel like that's something that maybe other people might be interested in trying for themselves, you know, and kind of like how
Yeah,
you
I
go
think
through that
if people,
process.
you know, people like those big books, right? And like
Yeah.
we all have those collections where, you know, it's maybe a box of dollar bin books really at the end of the day. It's like and you know, moving up into that big book from that base is actually an interesting journey that I
Yeah,
think people would watch. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, you know, and then it kind of like, I don't know, it would feel like some like culmination from the childhood collection. And then
Mhm.
one of the other ones that I always wanted was this one. And so this is, you know, Fantastic
Yeah.
Four
Wow.
49, first cover appearance of Silver Surfer and Galactus and First Full Galactus, because Silver Surfer was one of my favorite characters back then, and when I was a kid. And I kind of like followed this process where I upgraded this copy. It is now off my keeper list. It had been on it for a while, but it fell off relatively recently as I transitioned mostly into Golden Age.
Hmm.
That's kind of like a process I tell people that they should, you know, it's a good way to go, where I started, I think, with like a 3.0 or a 3.5. And then
Hmm.
over time I bought a 5.5 and then sold the 3.5, then a 6.5, then sold the 5.5, and then ended up with this one. And then the comic boom happened. And then because at first I was like, maybe I'll try to get a 9.0, and now a 9.0 is even still is like $7,000. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. It's an expensive book.
hold off for now.
But
Um,
that's is it for you where you you know, buy and sell books? Do you feel like because you can get that, like if you sold that 8.5 right now, you could probably tomorrow pick up another copy. Do you feel like it kind of
well,
makes it less a keeper book because of that, or?
that's exactly why it's not on my keeper list anymore. That's why my keeper list is almost, I think all of it is Golden Age except one, and that's the
Mhm.
Star Wars 135-cent variant.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
but that's as rare as a golden age. So
exactly, and that's what it comes down to. It's like, can I replace this book right now if I want? And
mhm.
that's how my collection kind of evolved over time. Was that at first it was a lot of things where I was like, I wanted. There were things that I knew about when I was a kid, you know, and that's where I started with what I knew, and then it evolved into Golden Age. And so before I get into that one, just, you know, this is just one this is one of the books that it was when I started to learn to grade. And so kind of
Mhm.
like that progression was this one, this
Oh,
Green
nice.
Green Lantern 76 9.2, extremely difficult book to get in the nines and above. And one that I was actually kind of upset that I think it probably could have gotten a 9.4, but CGC tore my book in the corner here.
Oh,
So
that
because I did a
actually, I
grading,
saw one of your videos about that where you were saying that there is that fear that when
yeah.
you send it to CGC, they can actually do more damage to the book.
Yeah, I mean, I had a grading video on my, it was one of the first videos I put out on my channel, was this book, and it very
Mhm.
clearly does not have a tear. Right
Yeah, yeah.
there. So yeah, so I mean, I'm still happy with the 9.2. I mean, it's an incredible grade, but like this was one where I started to learn about grading, and so I was really evaluating books when I saw them on eBay, and I bought this one on eBay for like $300, and
Wow.
ended up, you know, being a 9.2, which is I think like a $3,000
That's
book at this
that,
point.
yeah.
But then, so getting into like what got me into Golden Age was these. I'd say I had bought a couple Golden Age books prior to this, but these were the ones that really got me into it. And so it was Suspense Comics number 11,
That's one
and
of the best covers, by the way.
yeah, I love it. And then Famous Funnies number 214. And so the reason that these got me into Golden Age, or how they got me into Golden Age, was I got onto Instagram. And so
Mhm.
Instagram has been a really big
It's a
influence.
gold mine in terms of books that you can find.
Well, and knowledge, like just like
Mhm.
seeing stuff, you know, that's why I feel like, you know, I talk about it on the channel, and I don't know if sometimes people don't really get, like, they probably think like, oh, Instagram, it's like, you know, it's just like young kids and stuff, like posting
Yeah,
pictures of their
yeah, yeah.
food. And so, but it's like, there is a big, serious comic collector community on Instagram.
Show that
And
suspense a bit more, just because I think it's a great book. Like you didn't really show it as well as you could have.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
It is one of the best covers. But we'll let you finish
Yeah.
about that.
So this is an LB Cole cover. He uses this devil character on a number of covers. The
Mhm.
most well-known one is Mass Comics number 2.
Yeah,
Then you've got this one, and then you've got that like Terrifying Tales something. I can't remember the
yeah.
number.
I can't remember the number. Yeah.
Um, but this Mask 2 is probably my favorite depiction of him, but I do really, really like this one with, you know, like sprinkling the
Believe it
money
or not,
down.
this is my favorite version. I just love the fact that he's pouring money on people.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
It's
it's so
so
great.
great. But this is an example too of like what I like. I mean, and it's because of what I can afford too. You know, it's what I like to buy. Is this is a 1.8, but it presents really, really well, and it's because it's got a couple pieces missing out of the back. You know, one up here and then one. It's hard with the reflection, but one
Yeah,
down
when it's
here.
on the back, do you really
And,
care?
no, no, I don't. But like for pet peeves, pieces missing out of the front is like my
Yeah,
biggest pet peeve.
yeah,
But
yeah,
pieces out of the back, I couldn't care less.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah. So
but
you
yeah,
picked that up from Instagram, or?
yeah, I bought this one from Instagram. But the thing was, I followed someone on Instagram called Comic Book Nerd Girl,
Oh,
and she has an incredible collection. I've actually got one of the books I've gotten here is one that I picked up from her. She had it was like a 5 or a 5.5 that I thought we
wow.
had a deal worked out and it fell through. And so I was really I was pretty upset that I didn't end up getting hers. She's trying to put together a Catman run, the
Oh,
Golden Age
okay.
Catman run. And so it ended up being that there was someone else that had a Catman book that she was willing to trade. So she took that one, you know, it was
Oh,
like, yeah.
okay.
But yeah, so she posted a picture of hers, you know, whatever it was, maybe 2 years ago or something. And no, probably 3 years ago now. And that's what really got me interested in it. And I ended up buying a copy that popped up on Instagram like 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And I've never seen one on Instagram again.
No, no, I've only seen that book maybe once or twice for
Yeah,
available
I've
for
seen it on
sale.
a couple heritage auctions,
That's what I'm
and
saying. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's why I tell people, I'm like, there's some rare Golden Age stuff you can come across if you pay attention, you know, on Instagram. And so that's where I got this one. And then the other book that she posted that really caught my attention, in addition to another one, was her copy of this, which she had a 7.0.
Oh, wow.
And so that then I ended up picking up this one maybe a year or so after that. I've put together. I've got all the famous funnies I want. There are
So
certain covers I
you've
like
gotten the
more.
Fazetta run? Is like that's
I,
what
I don't have all of them because I don't like all of them.
Mhm.
I don't care for 211 or 216, and
Okay.
209 I'm kind of indifferent on. But like 210, 212, 13, 14, and 15, I really like all of those.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's the other one that really caught my attention. And I didn't even really know who Frank Frazetta was at that point. And so then I was like,
Mhm.
man, what is that? And so I started getting into that. And so now I'm a big Frank Frazetta fan. I went after these, and it took me about, was it? I did a video on. I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years to get all the copies for this. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I could have, like, there would be auctions that would come up, and I could maybe just, like, if I had unlimited money, you could buy one. But
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
I've got to I got to try to find those deals. The last one on mine that was the hardest for me to get was 213.
Okay.
That tends to be the most popular, but 214 is my favorite. The Red Planet cover.
Mhm.
But then, like, as I was going through, like, one of the first books that really got me into rarity, like rarity really started appealing to me with Golden Age.
Mhm.
And it was this one right here, Flash Comics number 104.
That's a great cover.
So this is the last cover or last issue in the run until the Silver Age, when it restarts at Flash 105. And I personally, I'm not a huge fan of the character design of Golden Age Flash, but I really like the character design of Hawkman. And so the Flash run has a lot of Hawkman only covers, and this might be my favorite one because you can tell I like red, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I was gonna say that. Yeah.
so it's got the red background. It's you know, this really cool like yellow inlay in it, and then he's got that huge, you know, mace that he carries around. So but yeah, so this one is a super rare book. I've probably only seen it come up for sale 3 times in the last few years, you know, and this was one of them. And so that's one of the things that really started to appeal to me was rarity, because it's just like I like the idea of that I can't just go out and buy something if I want it. I like that you have to like wait and search, and you know, when you finally get one and it's the price you want, you know, it's that all becomes, you know, really kind of exciting to me. So that's one of the things that really has appealed to me about the Golden Age. Then this is that one that I got 2 here, but one of the ones that I had shown in that last video that we were talking about. Then I started getting, like, as I learned more about Golden Age, I started learning about pedigrees, and so that was this one right here, this Catman 28.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful copy too.
And yeah, so it's I mean, a lot of the I've noticed a lot of the Cosmic Airplane have that stamp too on it.
So is that
Um,
one of the identifiers that they use for it?
I wonder if it is, because I see this W.C. Holt Jr. on a number of them, and it's not on all of them. You know, it's just like with Okajima's. Okajima isn't written on all of them, and that kind of thing. Or the Davis Crippen don't all have the D on them, but I've seen it on enough that I'm guessing it's probably something that they can use as an identifier. But this is. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just quickly explain what the Cosmic Aeroplane like.
Right. So yeah, so the Cosmic Airplane pedigree. This was a guy who was a teacher, and he would use comics to help teach students how to draw. And so a lot of times on the interior, you'll have tracings of the images on the interior. You'll have notes in the margins about things that he wanted to talk about or whatever, that kind of thing. And so it's more than like a lot of pedigrees. I kind of call them like it's like hoarder pedigrees. I mean that's what the Mile High, the Edgar Church. I mean, that guy was just a huge hoarder, but he kept the books in impeccable condition. And so in this, it's a little more than that. I'm sure he's probably also kind of a hoarder, but there's a little more story behind it. And that's one of the things I really like about this pedigree. And I can't show any because I have them at CGC right now, but like my favorite pedigree is the Okajima pedigree.
Yeah, you mentioned that many times on your channel. I think that's a great one too.
And there was a book that sold in this last Signature Heritage auction that kind of proves how much value those Okajima pedigrees add, and that was the Catman 24, which is it's a crazy combination because it's a Japanese World War II cover, and it's the Okajima pedigree while she was in the internment camp. And it's a Schomburg cover,
so many things going for it.
It has everything. I mean, there's hardly a book that's going to beat that one in terms of that, the fact that it's the Okajima pedigree combined with that. Because if people aren't aware, the Okajima pedigree, it was the woman that was in one of the Japanese internment camps in the United States during World War II. But she would go and buy comics every week. And so the ones that it's one of the smallest pedigrees that's out there, if not the smallest. It's about 1,000 books, but only known about 350, whereas most pedigrees are thousands. Like the Promise Collection was 5,000. The Edgar Church is like 18 or something. It's like 15 or 18,000. And so it's very small. And if you have one that's from the World War II era, when she was in the internment camp, it's even crazier in terms of the jump in value. So for that one, for example, I'd value that Catman that sold, it was like a 4.0, I think, at probably about $3,500 if it had sold regular. It sold for over 13,000. Wow. You get like a 4x multiple minimum a lot of times on that book.
When the Promise Collection first came out, like all the hype around the Promise Collection, I was noticing like 3x. Like
I mean, a lot of the Promise Collection, I thought I saw about 50% to 100% jumps for most of it.
As I said at the beginning, and then Heritage does what Heritage does, and they started dumping all these Promise Collection books, and then it became maybe 50% above. But at the beginning, it was like crazy, because I wanted to get one just for the pedigree, and I was noticing books that were like maybe $100 books were selling for $300, and I was like,
I would say that's where the big gap was. The lower value books were getting huge multiples. The higher value books were getting like the 50% to 100%. But yes, the lower, like the run filler stuff was getting like massive jumps. And because you're speaking of the Promise Collection, so this is my Promise Collection book. This is the book. Detective Comics 168, first appearance of Red Hood. This is like, it's arguably my favorite book in my collection. There's a couple in competition for it, and part of it is because I like the pedigree, but also just one of the coolest Batman keys. Red Hood, first first origin story of the Joker, and even though it's like the Promise Collection, I guess I was lucky because the Promise Collection is known for those 9.4, 9.6, 9.8 books, and if that had been this, I would never been able to afford it. But a 1.8, I don't know what happened to this one, if it was like on the bottom of the stack or something or what, but it presents really well. That's the big plus. It's just detached and it has a tear on the bottom of the spine. So, but yeah, so that one's one of my.
But even in a 1.8, that's an expensive book.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, if somebody wanted it from me, I wouldn't sell it for whatever they would probably interpret the market as. I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah, of
it's like,
course.
it's
Yeah.
like what I would let it go for, and so, but yeah, that's then, I'd say like one of the next like big transitions for me was pre-code horror. I mean, the Suspense Comics 11, it's like you could kind of call it horror just because there's a devil on it, but not really. It's to me,
Hmm.
it's not fully there yet.
Yeah.
And so,
It wasn't intended as a horror title. It was
right.
just, yeah.
I mean, other than like, like Suspense 8's pretty creepy. So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it's got some in there. But then this,
Suspense 3 is my favorite. It's like the
two,
one where
oh
she's
yeah,
like
of
being
course.
lowered
Yeah.
down and she's like, it's just so
Yeah.
awesome.
Suspense 3. I mean, I did a video about it maybe a couple months ago, because there was a pretty big controversy on a Suspense 3 that was for sale on Heritage in their last signature auction. Not this one, but the one in
Hmm.
June or January. And where it was a Blue Label 1.0 that someone had been looking through like prior books to kind of like help price for when they were looking at buying it as well, and they saw on Go Collect that the exact same cover had been in a CBCS 1 or CBCS 0.5 incomplete. And
Yeah,
so so what had happened is somebody had bought that book, had
and married
found
it.
a cover and married it, and then CGC graded it as universal. And
Yeah,
so they ended up, they were notified. Heritage pulled the book. It got sent back into CGC and it got regraded. It's now a green label, married cover and centerfold. So they actually missed the married
oh
centerfold
wow,
too.
that's
Um,
huge.
but it still sold for like $28,000. So
I mean, it's a great book. It's a great
I
book.
was
I mean,
talking I
those
was talking to someone about it, and they were like, it sold for that much because you talked about it too.
you promoted it. You promoted. I remember your video on that. That was great. Yeah,
Oh man, because I figured the green label was like maybe 15 to
yeah, yeah,
18, and then it went for 28, and I was like, no, I thought that's what the 1.0 blue was going to sell for. And
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
but this
it's a
was,
rare book. I mean, there's probably less than 20
oh,
on the census.
uh yeah, it's around there. Yeah, it is definitely a rare book. In terms of auctions, I think I've only seen it twice. There was a Comic Link like 6.5 or something that sold for, what was it? It was a lot. A couple, like maybe a year ago, like a few 100,000 or something like that.
Hmm.
And then this one, other than those two, I hadn't seen one I haven't personally seen one in auction. I don't watch every auction. I mean, so I'm sure I could
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
something, but the other book, the book that really started to get me into pre-code horror was this one.
yeah. That's a
So
great book.
Crime Suspense Stories 22, the Johnny Craig decapitation cover. My first copy was a 1.8 or 2.0 that I bought again on Instagram. I also bought
Mhm.
this one on Instagram, but I bought it raw and got it graded. And so this is one of those that, I mean, when you think of pre-code horror books, this is it's one of the first ones that comes to mind. I mean, there are a few that you could throw out there, but to me, this is probably the most, in terms of general knowledge of like the public, in terms of, homage
Yeah,
covers and that kind of stuff. This is probably the one.
the most
And
famous. Yeah.
so it's one of those that it's in competition with that Detective Comics 168 for like my top books. But
Hmm.
but yeah. Yeah.
But
So
that one, I actually did a video about that one specific book. That book to me was the book that ended the golden age.
oh,
Because
this one?
yeah,
That's
that one particular book, because it was when when they did the Senate hearings, they they showed that book, and William Gaines basically was like, oh, we tried to tone it down,
it's
we tried to,
tasteful.
it's tasteful, it's okay, it's not too bad. And that comment, and then the media coverage the next day, it was like instant that they realized they had to do something, or the whole
Well, I mean,
industry
you
was
could
gone.
tell. You could tell they did tone it down, though. It's like, the
Yeah,
axe has the black on it instead of
yeah,
red,
it
and
looks
then you
more
can't
like
you
goo.
can't see the
Yeah,
base of her neck. So it's like
yeah,
this could be just a different person.
yeah,
It's like it's
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
necessarily the same person.
Yeah, I
So
mean, they did like that. That's the thing. They actually did tone it down, but the way it came, where he just made it sound like he didn't really care. Like
yeah. Well,
was,
that's the funny thing, because like the people who really didn't care were Harvey. They just kept
yeah,
like
exactly.
they just kept ramping it up, and they're just like they didn't tone down anything.
Yeah, I mean, there are like little disintegration covers going on. Like, yeah,
Yeah, all over
yeah,
the place.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, but then just like kind of like some I guess the next big transit, or I'd say the thing that I've always kind of gone through with my collecting is if I see a book that appeals to me, I kind of go on
Mhm.
that as like my gut feeling for if I think that's a good book for me to get. You know, it's
Sure.
just kind of like I trust my taste in covers and all that kind of thing. And that's kind of where like the rest, I think most of the rest of the books that I'm going to talk about here are. And so the first one here was Marvel Mystery Comics #7. This is one of the other my favorite books that I own, and this
Mhm.
is the second Schomburg Human Torch cover, and this is the one to me that I generally say is like it's when you first see the Human Torch where he really looks like the Human Torch.
Mhm.
His first cover is in 5, but I feel like he doesn't quite look like the Human Torch like we know yet.
Yeah.
And so this one, it's this where I started really getting into kind of like the not this one specifically, but the where let's see, I started getting into more of like the Good Girl Art type covers,
Yeah.
as well as getting into the Schomburg stuff. I don't think this was my first Schomburg Marvel Mystery, but I think it was my second.
Mhm.
And so I've really gotten into the Marvel Mystery books. I like the rarity with them. I like Schomburg's depictions of the Human Torch. I like all the World War II type covers, and especially when he adds in multiple elements, when you have like the Good Girl Art type covers too. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just something that's really like visually appealing. I like these books, and so I'm always looking for them. And that let's see, that's where like kind of like transitioning to some of the, say, like the Good Girl Art type covers. And this one you'd almost call this one like not quite Good Girl Art, like Bad Girl Art. I don't know, but Spirit 22 is
I
one
have
of.
that one too, right next to me.
It's just, oh yeah, nice. This is probably this might be my favorite, if I would call it like a Good Girl Art cover from the
Well,
Golden
it's
Age.
considered to be the grail of good girl art covers.
I love this one. And it's just like it's something. I think it's the simplicity of it, and I was showing this book to my wife yesterday. I was talking about it, and she was like, "That is a cool cover,"
Yeah.
and I like the kind of like the transition, the color transition in the background,
Yeah,
and
the
then just
blues on it are always amazing. I mean,
yeah.
just
Well, that's why when I bought this one on an Instagram live sale, it was I think they were at it was like San Diego Comic-Con or something, and it was Elite.
Mhm.
They were hosting a sale, and this this one shop had this book, and I had them like bring the camera up and go close over it because I wanted to make sure it wasn't faded, because sometimes you get those like faded covers, and I really
Mhm.
wanted the bright blues and yellows and stuff. So this
Mhm.
was one of those. And then kind of like to go along with that was this one was Seven Seas #6, which is
Yeah.
a Matt Baker cover, because Matt Baker, I think, if people are into Golden Age, he's like the Good Girl Art cover artist. I mean, he didn't do Spirit. Spirit was a Will Eisner. This is a
Yeah.
Will Eisner
Will
cover,
Eisner, yeah.
but definitely a very different style from Baker. But
Mhm.
his that most people would call like the Grail is Phantom Lady 17, but Seven Seas 4 is up there in the conversation, and which I do not have. I keep
Yeah.
trying to get one, but man, they're so expensive.
Yeah, I've been trying to. Yeah,
I feel like
that's
I
the book I'm
missed
looking for.
the boat on that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it just
It's
keeps
crazy.
selling for more. But this was I really like this one too. 5, I'm a little I don't care as much about, but 4 and
Mhm.
6 I think are both just incredible.
Well, the
Matt Baker
shark is
covers.
really awesome.
Yeah, that's what people like the shark. They like the underwater, shark covers. Like that's
Yeah, yeah.
what it's a big selling point. But yeah, so like the Good Girl Art covers, really started to to appeal to me. And then kind of like in that same vein, I started kind of like looking at books that were just, I would call like shocking. And
Mhm.
this one, I had never seen this book come up for sale. I think I've seen it twice in the last 3 years. And that's Rangers Comics #14. This is the most insane cover I have ever seen in my life. In
Yeah,
terms of
no,
like,
it's awesome.
if people can see this one, it's like, it's not just that it's like a bondage cover. You've got this guy who's going to behead her, and they went into some crazy detail. Like her hair is bolted down on the ground on the back there. I
Mhm.
mean, when I saw that, I was like, that's nuts. Like that is just ridiculous level of detail and, you know, brutality in these covers. And so,
Mhm.
so this one I ended up, you know, picking up just because I was just so surprised by this one. And now the other thing that I always like to talk about with these is this is where uh, I am always blown away by the difference in prices with CBCS versus CGC.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I
a
said,
huge difference. Yeah.
this is one of the rarest books I've ever come across in terms of how often I see it.
Mhm.
And I still feel like it went for a steal because it was in a CBCS case. I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. It doesn't just apply to like modern or silver or bronze. It's like golden age too. And that's why I'm always looking, like
For
whenever I see a CBCS book where it's like some really rare book that I've been looking for, I'm like, you know, and it's up for auction. I'm like, okay, I'm watching this one. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, this is my chance maybe to pick that
Yeah,
up.
I mean, it can make like 20-30% difference in terms
Right?
of price.
Yeah,
It's
easily.
which
You
is
know,
huge. Which
and
I actually
there are some
I actually
exceptions.
have that book too. It's actually a first appearance as well.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it doesn't denote it, I believe, but it is a first appearance. I forgot what character. It's one of the key characters for Fiction House. It
Because
made their
I
first.
think Firehair is in like 21 or something
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
that's
It's a
not
little later.
Firehair. It's a different character. I
Okay.
forgot which one. I'll look it up later and
All
tell
right.
you.
Yeah. And then let's see. This was another just example of one that the first time I saw this, I was just like, this is an incredible cover. And that was Underworld Crime #7.
I just picked that
So,
up too recently.
oh, nice. Yeah. This one, the colorist is the person who really needs to be thanked for this cover,
Yeah,
because just like the way that they drew the reflection of the light on her face, you
it's
know,
really
I mean,
good. Yeah.
it's what sets this book off. And so this is just an example of one of those ones where I saw it and I'm like, that is an awesome book. I didn't know anything about it at the time, you know, and I started, you know, looking into it a little more. And so, yeah, this one, I should probably get it in a new case just because it would look a little nicer. But
Yeah, I don't like those old CGC cases.
no,
They
they're
just look a
super
little.
flimsy.
Yeah, they look really flimsy. Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
I mean, I remember the first comic I got that was like one of these older CGC cases was a Fantastic Four 50. It was like a 7.5, and
Mhm.
I remember getting it and I was like, is it fake? You know, because like you
Yeah,
you
yeah.
could open the
You can
sides,
open
and
it
I
on the side. Yeah, yeah,
was like, did somebody pull the book out or something? You know?
yeah.
And so yeah, there's always those like weird things. Those like, and you realize like you're not the only person that thought that. I saw other people comment very similar things on my
Mhm.
channel before, and when they ask questions, I'm like, oh no, I'm like that's normal. You know, it's just like when you're used to the new cases,
Mhm.
you don't realize that. Oh, sorry, hold on one second. There we go. Then let's see. I'll go over maybe a couple more books. So
Okay.
one of them was this one was one of the other books that Comic Book Nerd Girl had posted when I first got on Instagram. And
Mhm.
when she put it up for sale, I reached out immediately and I did get this one.
Mhm.
So this is Baffling Mysteries #22
Mhm.
and a 9.6. And so to me, this grade was just absurd.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd never had anything like this type of grade for a Golden Age book. This is 1954. And it's not just top of census for this book, it's top of census for the entire run.
Oh
There's
wow.
one other 9.6 from the Northford pedigree. And so, and other than that, those are the only two 9.6s in the entire Baffling Mysteries run. So
Wow.
I thought that was pretty cool to be able to get something like that,
Yeah,
even
that's
though,
good bragging rights. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a little more obscure title, but it's from Ace, you know, which I think there are a number of people that like. There's some cool stuff in Ace, like the Beyond run has some really cool books
Yeah,
in it.
I collect both the Baffling run and the Beyond run, and you know, there's certain books that are super expensive within those two runs, but most
Yeah,
of them are fairly affordable, actually.
yeah, they really are. I mean, that's whenever people are asking, you know, kind of like if they want to start getting into something and want to spend a lot of money, there are definitely certain runs you can go towards, and Baffling and Beyond are two of them. The tough part is it's like, will they ever be in demand? And I can't say for sure, you know,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
but
If
yeah,
we keep
there
on
are definitely
promoting them.
yeah, there are definitely ranges though, you know, like
Mhm.
you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on Golden Age books. There's plenty of stuff out there, you know, like if you wanted to start getting into like good girl art type books, the
Mhm.
like Jungle Comics and Jumbo Comics, the later issues, you can get some really nice copies, like high
Yeah,
grade
really
copies,
cheap too.
cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Then let's see, this one, I'll close out with a different one, but this one, I'd shown some Disney stuff, and so I just always like to show this book.
Oh yeah,
This is Walt Disney's Comics and Stories #1. I've always liked the page flip, type
me too.
stuff,
Me
and
too.
there's just something, like, I'm not big into really many of the other Disney books, but there was something about this cover that was really, visually appealing. I'm a person that really likes solid backgrounds. I think those always, when you have like a central character, they always really, just they
And
look
you
good.
like red, so
And I like red. Now I do have that large feature 16 that I like, that goes next to this one that I posted on Instagram a little bit ago. I picked up, but that's the first Daisy Duck, and it's a similar, but it's a yellow cover with him on the center, and I think those two look nice together.
I thought this was the first Daisy.
No, that's a large feature comics number. I think it's 16. I'm pretty sure it's 16.
Because I thought, like, in the like I have a raw copy of that book. In it, there's one page which has Daisy on it, but she's called Donna Duck.
Well, then that would be the first appearance of Donna Duck. So, but yeah, at least from my understanding, it's the back cover of large feature 16 is the first appearance of
Daisy Duck. Book came out first?
I don't know. So I think this one did.
Yeah, so that's why I would say.
I don't know. My understanding has always been a large feature.
I'm gonna push back on that.
Yeah, we'll have to check on that one then. But then the last one is probably, this is like the third book that's in competition for like one of my favorite books I have is Captain America Comics number 74.
Yeah, great cover.
Which, again, the red covers, but also just the Red Skull depiction. I think that's the
creepiest depiction of him. Yeah.
It's all the other ones, he's generally part of the cover doing something on the cover, with a bunch of other characters. This is the one where he's like, in the Golden Age at least, where he's the central character and just very menacing. So yeah, this one I picked up sometime last year. I was really happy to be able to get a copy of this. So
I don't know if it was because of you or something, but that book recently got on the hot list. I saw it on the hot list. I was like, oh, is this because Ryan
on like a Comic Tom hot list?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wow. I didn't catch that.
On some hot list. I was like, what? How is this book on the hot list? But it's a great book. It's
Yeah, no. I mean, it's because like a lot of the Captain America stuff, as you got like later on in the run, it's not as popular. It's because he's like breaking up a bank heist or something like that. But that's one where it really it's a visually appealing cover.
It almost has like a pre-code horror look to it. Like it's really creepy cover.
Yeah, I think I did like a top 10 pre-code horror books in my collection, and I think I put that one on there. And I was like, I know it's like, I'm like, I don't know if this counts or not, but it's like, I mean, the next issue definitely does. 75, 100% is like a pre-code horror type cover. But this one, it's like if you didn't have Red Skull as an established character, you probably would immediately think that. But given he's like an established character, it's a little harder to make that determination. But
yeah. Wow. So I mean, you showed some pretty big books, but what would be your next book that you want to chase for actually adding to your personal collection?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, there are a couple that, now I don't know if I would call it my next book, but I would call it like my end goal type book would be either, I would say either Batman 1 or Detective 31, and they're both like, and it's one of those things where I have this conversation with a lot of people where it's like, if you could convert your keeper books, because like, I mean, I don't know, with a number of those there, I could probably convert it into a low grade.
Yeah, you could easily
31, if I wanted to. And so it's like, but do I want to? And I don't know. That's one of those.
Give up like 10 to 20 books to get one book. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a tough decision to make, because I mean, like I like the variety. I mean, that's one of the things. Like, I mean, you see, like across those books, I have I have Disney books, I have pre-code horror books, I have good girl art books, I have superhero books. I like that variety. And if I just had one book, I feel like I'd get bored.
Yeah. Well, that's if you look at my collection, the reason I buy low grades
Mhm.
is to have that variety. And I just love too many books, and I want to have them
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge in that kind of like decision making process. Because I mean, like we've talked about some. I mean, for me, there's the business side and the collecting side, and
Mhm.
so I have to always think of that. Whereas like if it's something where I am not reselling it, then
Mhm.
it's something that I'm not actively using that money to buy new books. And so I have to think of the impact on the business side of things if I'm not selling a book.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely the type of thing that comes into my mind every time. And that's one of the reasons I established that my like keeper list
Mhm.
rule, and why it's kind of like dropped down in number over time. And it's because I've gone to bigger books, and so I can't justify keeping as many. It's
Yeah.
like keeping 100 books before might have been fine, but now when you have a book that's $10,000, it's like, well,
Yeah.
I got to
Keep a
sell
hundred
like
of those.
5 books to get to justify keeping that one. And so
Mhm.
it's dropped down to it's actually a little below 35 now. Cause, I did I have a big trade that's going through right now where I'm getting rid of a number of my bigger books. and
Oh,
so,
nice.
and so we'll see how, I mean, and I'm trading that I'm actually trading for more books. And so it's like a business trade basically, because I'm
Mhm.
getting more books and I get more, I'm getting more value. It's like how those types of trades often work. I'm getting more
And do
value
you
in
do
the book.
trades where it's a little bit of books, a little bit of money, or?
This one is, I don't do trades very often at all. I rarely do them, but this is an instance where the terms were good enough for me to justify that I would do the trade, and give up a number of my top books. Like that's the other thing. It's like, because I have to, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I know when I get rid of certain books how hard it is, if
Is to
ever,
replace
to
them.
replace
Yeah.
them. So because it's just like, and often it's not just the rarity of the book itself, it's the grade. It's
Mhm.
coming, it's like when a book in that grade hasn't sold for 3 years, it's like, okay, well, if it comes up again, even, is
Yeah.
it going to go price that I can even afford again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
All right.
so yeah, so it's actually like, I would say it's like the reverse is what I'm doing for someone else. Like they're getting a number of big books. I'm taking I'm taking the less expensive books in trade, um but yeah, I mean, the big like end goal books for me, like I don't think a Tech 27 is ever in the cards for me, and Action 1 isn't ever in the cards for me.
You
I
never
don't have
know.
that. I don't have much money.
Do the video series on your, you're selling your childhood collection, and build it up to Detective 27.
Yeah, yeah. I
That'd be
mean, I would probably have to have my channel for about 20 or 30 years to maybe build that up, if even,
Mhm.
So, but I'm trying to think like of something a little more achievable. I mean, with the probably a Seven Seas 4. Not that I want to talk
Okay.
about it,
Mhm.
but I would really like to get a copy of Seven Seas. There was one in, I think, this last Heritage auction,
Yeah,
and
there was one recently that I
and
saw.
it went more than I want.
Yeah, they actually had a Valentine's Day sale. That's where I
Well,
actually
that
picked
I
up.
mean, that was the 9.2 Crippen, like
Yeah, yeah,
went for
yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah,
$90,000.
yeah. So I was watching that book. Actually, I picked up the Phantom Lady in that
Oh,
book.
nice.
And that was I picked up the Phantom Lady 17. So
Oh,
that's good.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That was a restored copy.
restored
Yeah.
80. Yeah,
Nice. Wow. Yeah,
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. So
So
that's
yeah,
pretty.
no, the only Phantom Lady I have 16 right now. I think
Mhm.
that's it. I think the only one I have right now is 16, and it's a green, it's a qualified. It's missing the last page.
That's a
Um,
Sony book.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah, no, it's a great cover. It's a great book. Yeah, I've wanted a 17 for a long time, and
Mhm.
I mean, it was so much more affordable like 3 years ago. Like if only I'd
Yeah,
been into it, like the Golden Age stuff more at that point, and I would have made the effort to get it.
yeah.
Same thing with uh, uh Startling 49. That's one of those other ones that I've really
I
wanted.
missed out on that actually. I was gonna buy a restored copy. And I was trying to I talked the guy down to, like, I think it was like a 5.0 or a 6.
Mhm,
And I talked him down to like around 5 or 6 thousand.
mhm.
I probably should have bought it. I just I didn't pull the trigger, and
Well, yeah, I mean that same thing. It happened to me. There was one up on Instagram. Elite had it like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a
mhm.
half ago, something like that. And I think it's like a 7.0, and they had it. It was like a 7.0 old label, and it was like 12,000 or 13,000. And at that point, the price was probably like 8. And
Yeah.
they had it upped because they're like, it's an old label, you know, it's like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't play that game.
That game.
You know?
Yeah.
So I didn't buy it, even though now I'm like, oh gosh, I probably should buy that.
Yeah. Now that's like a $20,000-$30,000 book.
Yeah. That's a strange book though. It has a lot of price compression, you know, where it's like from a 3.0 to a 6.0, it goes for, there's very little variation in price. It's just a unique one with that, where I don't know why that is, but then you have some, like that Promise one sold for quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I actually talk about that a lot on my channel, where because I buy the lower grade books, I think there's always going to be the situation where you get that price compression because people just want to get into the book.
Yep.
And so what ends up happening is the lower grades go for way more than they really should.
Yeah, that's like Amazing Fantasy 15. You know, like a 0.5 still sells for like $14,000, and then a 2.5 is going for 20.
Yeah, you know, it's really compressed. Yeah,
yeah. People it's like there's so much competition at the low end where it's just like you just want a copy that it never seems to drop that much. Whereas at the high end, that, you know, it's been
it's been tanking.
So
that was actually one of my plans for this year. I haven't done this plan yet, but it was to, you know, take some of those lower grade copies, pay few $100 more, and upgrade them. You know.
Yeah.
But it hasn't quite happened yet. But that is the plan.
but yeah, so for, I guess for anybody that's not aware, Startling 49 is this like Alex Schomburg airbrush robot cover where the robot looks like Bender from Futurama. It is generally called the Bender cover, and so like that's what it's famous for.
I actually wonder if Bender was modeled after it.
They claim it wasn't, but it had to be. Like it
looks exactly like
it is Bender.
Yeah, it's so weird.
So I mean, and I was a huge Futurama fan, you know, when I loved that show. And so that was one of the first books I remember when I got back into comics. My older brother sent me a picture of that book. And that's what kind of really got me to start thinking about it. But yeah, so I guess if I had to pick like 2 books that I'd be in it, you know, again, it's like, it's always tough because then it's like, it makes people more aware of them, but it'd be Startling 49 and 7 Seas 4 are the probably my 2 that I would really like to add. But I don't need anybody reaching out to me that they have one. I will, you know, just keep my eye out and hopefully catch one at some point.
Yeah.
I mean,
so just to wrap up, because we've been going actually for over an hour, where can people find you? What are you up to? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm on Instagram under Automatic Comics. I'm on YouTube under Automatic Comics. You know, Instagram, I post regularly. I post stuff, you know, usually just like books I have that I like showing, as well as kind of things for my YouTube channel. And then on YouTube, I put out videos usually 2 to 3 times a week. It's a variety. Like I do unboxings if you like seeing kind of like some cool old books. I mean, for the most part, it's bronze, silver, and gold. I have an occasional modern that I pick up, like some J. Scott Campbell cover that I end up buying or something. But then, you know, a lot of the rest is kind of like comic market or buying and selling related, you know, where it's, I watch these weekly Heritage comic auctions, and I use that information to try to kind of like watch the trends in what's going on in the comic market. And also just to kind of like, I do somewhere I do like some top 10 lists, like some surprising sales. Cause I always like to point out that even when the market is trending up or down, there are always high and low sales. It's just the percentage of them shifts. And so in a down market, you're going to have a lot less high sales, but they still happen, and you're going to have, you know, more low sales. But even in the up market, you can still find deals. There's always books that go below their expected value. You just gotta, you know, there's less of them, you know, you just gotta, you know, keep your eyes open for it. So yeah. I mean, market stuff, you know, unboxings, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Great. So all the links to Automatic Comics will be in the description below. Thanks again for coming on the show. We'll have to do this again. There's so much more.
It was a lot of fun.
Okay. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Thanks for having me.